Prince William took the stage with calm confidence. His message? A new, modern monarchy. Roles were redefined. Key names were included, but Queen Camilla's name was never mentioned. Moments later, she collapsed, pale, silent, and motionless, right there in front of the world. Prince William's decision to speak at the royal ceremony was unexpected. It wasn't on the official schedule. Typically, such events follow a strict protocol. Carefully planned, carefully timed. A prince making a last-minute request to address the public? That was enough to make people curious. And quietly, a little uneasy. Even inside the palace, not everyone knew what he planned to say. Some assumed it would be a short tribute. Others thought it might highlight ongoing charitable work. But William's silence in the days leading up to the event only added to the speculation. He hadn't shared notes. He hadn't offered clues. By the time the day arrived, the tension was noticeable. Guests filled the hall, dressed in traditional formality. Cameramen focused their lenses. Courtiers lined the walls, attentive. But under the surface of ceremony, there was anticipation. When Prince William stood up, the entire room turned to him. His steps were calm. No rush, no signs of hesitation. He reached the front, looked out over the crowd, and spoke with quiet certainty. "We're not just here to reflect on tradition," he said. "We're here to shape what comes next." The words were simple, but they landed differently. He began outlining a new vision for the monarchy, one that leaned on service, transparency, and shared responsibility. It wasn't just talk. There were plans, real structural changes. He announced the formation of the Royal Advisory Council, a body of working royals who would take on expanded roles. Princess Anne, known for her work ethic and no-nonsense approach, would lead internal institutional reform. Prince Edward would take charge of renewing ties across the Commonwealth, and Catherine, Princess of Wales, would expand her advocacy work in education, youth mental health, and early family development. William framed the changes as part of a renewed duty, a shift away from symbolic roles and toward practical engagement. The idea was clear. The monarchy would adapt, become leaner, more involved, and closer to the public it served. But something stood out. There was no mention of Queen Camilla. Seated beside King Charles, Camilla remained composed. She looked straight ahead, but the absence of her name was hard to ignore. As William continued naming responsibilities, listing figures involved in the new structure, her silence in the narrative grew louder. Some in the room noticed immediately. A few exchanged discreet glances. A royal aide seated near the back quietly leaned toward a colleague. Even King Charles looked briefly toward Camilla. A small turn of the head, his expression unreadable. But William continued calmly. He didn't pause. He didn't explain. The speech moved forward with confidence and direction. He spoke of relevance, of aligning royal service with modern values, of regaining trust, not by heritage, but through hard work and earned respect. He was respectful, clear, but unshakably firm. As the speech ended, William stepped back and returned to his seat beside Catherine. The applause began, but slowly. There was no roar, no standing ovation, just a slow, uncertain rhythm of clapping hands, as if everyone was still processing what they had just heard. Charles clapped too, politely. His eyes stayed forward. Camilla did not move. There had been no direct mention, no formal removal, but the message was unmistakable. A new structure was being built. Key roles had been defined. And Camilla, queen consort or not, was not part of it. It wasn't a confrontation. It wasn't loud. But in the world of royal tradition, silence can be louder than any public statement. And in that silence, the next chapter of the monarchy had begun. At first, no one noticed anything wrong. Queen Camilla remained seated beside King Charles, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. But within minutes of Prince William's speech ending, something in her demeanor shifted. She leaned slightly forward, her hands slipping from her lap. Her face turned pale. Her lips parted as if trying to say something, but no words came. It was subtle at first, easily missed, but the stillness of her body was not natural. It was the kind that followed shock. A nearby aide was the first to react. He leaned in, whispered her name, then quickly motioned for help. Within seconds, the palace's polished formality cracked. King Charles turned toward his wife, alarmed. His hand moved instinctively to her arm. Her breathing was shallow. She wasn't responding. Princess Anne, sharp and composed, called for the medical team. Catherine stood quickly, moving their children out of view. Prince William, still near the front, turned toward the scene. His expression froze. The room, filled with hushed voices and lingering tension just moments earlier, fell into a stunned silence. Courtiers stepped aside. The medical team emerged from behind the velvet curtains, making their way toward the Queen Consort. Camilla was gently lowered to the floor and examined. Her pulse was faint. Her eyes barely moved. A stretcher was brought in swiftly. For a moment, the palace, so practiced in control, had no script to follow. Every camera in the room, every lens, turned toward the unfolding emergency. The same crowd that had listened to Prince William reframe the monarchy now watched in disbelief as one of its most prominent members was carried out. Outside the palace, word spread fast. Within minutes, headlines broke the news. Queen Camilla collapses at royal ceremony. Social media lit up. Video clips captured her unsteadiness, slowed and shared across platforms. On TikTok, dramatic music underscored footage of her being helped by aides. On Twitter, hashtags trended within the hour. Camilla collapse, huge royal shock, monarchy shift. Initial statements from the palace were brief and vague. A dizzy spell, they said, due to stress. But the images told another story, one of real distress, not just fatigue. People began asking, was this health-related or emotional? Was it a coincidence that she collapsed minutes after being left out of William's speech? Whispers inside the palace were harder to contain. Aides privately admitted that Camilla had been under strain in the weeks leading up to the event. Her schedule had been scaled back quietly. Appearances missed. Some claimed she was deeply aware of a shift happening around her, and feared it. For years, Camilla had fought to earn a place in the public's good graces. From scandal to acceptance, her path to Queen Consort hadn't been easy. But with William's speech, it seemed like the future of the monarchy was being built without her. Now the collapse wasn't just a medical moment. It had symbolic weight. To some, it looked like her body had said what her voice could not. She had been removed, not by words, but by omission. And in that silence, everything she had worked for felt erased. Doctors attended to her quickly. She was taken to a nearby medical suite and later transferred to a private facility. By evening, the palace reported she was resting comfortably, but gave no further updates. Inside royal circles, the moment had already become a turning point. One minute, Prince William was unveiling the future. The next, the Queen Consort was carried away on a stretcher. Even for a monarchy known for its drama, this was unprecedented. And while the ceremony resumed, nothing felt the same. Behind the grandeur and gold, a quiet chaos had taken hold. The ceremony was meant to celebrate continuity, but what lingered in the air afterward was uncertainty. Queen Camilla's collapse had shifted the focus entirely. The headlines were no longer about Prince William's bold speech or his new role in shaping the monarchy's future. They were about a queen consort who left in silence, carried out before the world. Behind palace walls, the mood was tense. Staff who had spent weeks preparing every moment of the event were now scrambling to respond to a situation no one had rehearsed for. Medical updates were kept brief. Aides were instructed to refer all questions to the communications office. Inside Clarence House and Buckingham Palace, phones rang constantly. Press secretaries huddled to craft a message, not just to update, but to contain. By morning, the story had gone global. Cable news ran round-the-clock coverage. Was the Queen blindsided? Did William go too far? What happens now? Across social media, reactions were mixed. Some viewers expressed deep concern. Others pointed to the symbolism of her collapse as evidence that something much bigger was happening behind the scenes. What unsettled many wasn't just the fainting itself, it was the silence that followed. In a speech packed with vision and structure, William had omitted any mention of Camilla. And when the palace issued a statement, it avoided addressing the elephant in the room. It focused on her emotional exhaustion, not on her absence from the royal plan. For Camilla, it wasn't just a public health scare. It marked a moment where her position, already fragile in the eyes of some, seemed to vanish in real time. After years of rebuilding her image, after surviving public scrutiny and earning cautious acceptance, she was missing from the very future her family had just defined. The public, too, was divided. Loyalists defended her, accusing the institution of using her and discarding her once no longer needed. "She's earned that crown," one popular columnist wrote. "You don't just leave her out because she wasn't born to it." Others saw the shift as inevitable. "This isn't personal," argued younger royal watchers online. "It's generational." TikTok was especially ruthless. Clips of William's speech were edited alongside moments from Camilla's past. Tabloid headlines, old interviews, public backlash, framed as if history had finally caught up with her. Other videos portrayed her collapse as karma, or as a visual metaphor for the monarchy shedding its old skin. Inside the palace, the reactions were harder to read. King Charles, typically composed, was reportedly quiet and withdrawn in the hours after the event. Those close to him said he had not anticipated William's exclusion of Camilla, and while he supported his son's vision, he was deeply unsettled by what it had cost. His wife, after all, had been his closest companion through decades of scandal, loss, and transition. William, meanwhile, maintained a public silence. There was no follow-up statement, no clarification. Those who know him say this wasn't an oversight. It was intentional. His vision of the monarchy was leaner, more modern, and, in his view, more effective. It wasn't about punishing Camilla, but about pushing the crown into a space where every role had to be earned, not assumed. And yet, in excluding her, he had set off more than just public debate. He had opened a divide inside the palace that would be difficult to mend. For the first time in years, the monarchy wasn't just facing criticism from the outside, it was unraveling from within. What came next would depend not only on Camilla's recovery, but on how the royal family would respond to the questions they could no longer avoid. As days passed, the palace returned to its routine, or at least tried to. Camilla remained out of public view, recovering privately at an undisclosed location. Official updates were rare and brief, focused only on her health. But outside the gates of royal residences, the conversation had already moved past recovery. People were asking the harder question, what happens to Camilla now? Prince William's vision for the monarchy had been deliberate and clear. He named key figures for the future: Princess Anne, Prince Edward, Catherine. Their roles were defined, their duties elevated. But Camilla's omission wasn't just an oversight. It was now widely seen as intentional, and it left a gaping silence in the structure of the monarchy. For Camilla, that silence was deafening. After decades of building a place beside Charles, weathering scandal, earning public trust, and finally being crowned, Her contribution was erased in a matter of minutes. There was no mention of her work, no recognition of her efforts, no role in the future William laid out. For someone who had long existed in the background, often overlooked, the absence felt like a final verdict. Inside the palace, insiders debated the reasoning. Some believed William was simply focusing on a new generation, building a monarchy that spoke to younger audiences. Others suspected deeper tensions, long unspoken. Camilla had never fully connected with the younger royals. Her role was linked to Charles, not the institution. And now, with the monarchy moving toward modernization, William may have decided her chapter had closed. But that decision wasn't without consequences. Camilla's supporters felt the sting. Royal insiders who had watched her grow into the role of queen consort, who saw her take on unglamorous causes and support the king behind the scenes, felt her contributions had been cast aside. Even within certain corners of the press, commentators who once criticized her now questioned her exclusion. She was never the public's first choice, one royal reporter noted, but she earned her place. And now, it's like it never happened. To many, this moment felt less like a transition and more like a quiet erasure. Camilla, once mocked and then slowly redeemed, now faced the possibility of fading from public life. Not through scandal, but through silence. That silence spread. Charles, while still engaged in limited public duties, made no direct comment about his wife's exclusion. He was focused on his health, on recovery, on keeping the crown stable. But some said he was also struggling privately, with the weight of what had unfolded, and with the realization that his legacy and Camilla's might not be carried forward together. Camilla herself remained out of sight. No photos, no videos, just speculation. Was she stepping back willingly, or had the palace gently moved her aside? For the public, the meaning was split. Some saw it as justice, a long-delayed balancing of history. Others saw it as unfair. A woman finally accepted, only to be pushed out when the family no longer needed her. But regardless of opinion, one truth remained. She was no longer part of the conversation about what comes next. The royal family has always walked a line between tradition and evolution. With William's announcement, that line moved, and for Camilla, that meant falling behind it. While the headlines focused on William's speech and Camilla's collapse, something more subtle was unraveling within palace walls: the growing strain on the monarchy's most senior members. King Charles, now battling cancer, had reduced his public appearances significantly. His once busy schedule had given way to private treatments and carefully managed engagements. Though the palace reassured the public that his condition was stable, those close to the family whispered of fatigue, weight loss, and a man pushing through pain to maintain a steady image. His illness, though unspoken in public statements, hung heavily over everything. Princess Kate, too, had vanished from the spotlight. At first, her absence was explained as rest. Then came the revelation: chemotherapy. The news stunned the nation. For years, she had been the royal family's image of resilience and calm. Now, she was in recovery, facing a deeply personal battle while shielding her children from its weight. Her decision to suffer in silence was seen by many as brave, but it also meant that one of the monarchy's most visible figures was no longer present during one of its most fragile transitions. And then there was Camilla. Still recovering from her collapse, her absence had stretched from days into weeks. Her schedule had been quietly cleared, public appearances canceled. Royal insiders reported that she was resting at a country estate, but the truth was harder to pin down. Some said she was emotionally devastated. Others believed she had simply been pushed out. In this vacuum, all eyes turned to Prince William. He had become more than the heir. With his father ill, his wife recuperating, and his stepmother retreating from view, William was now the one holding the institution together. Foreign visits, internal meetings, charity patronages, and national appearances all were added to his calendar. What had once been a shared effort was quickly becoming his alone to carry. Staff at Kensington Palace reported the shift. William, typically known for his calm and measured approach, had become more focused, more direct. There were fewer delays, fewer debates. Decisions were being made quickly. It was as if he had already stepped into a role not yet officially his. But with that rise came a cost. The emotional toll within the family was becoming harder to mask. Behind closed doors, aides walked on eggshells. Family interactions were brief and tense. With Charles's future uncertain and Kate's health private, there was no clear roadmap forward. William was expected to lead, not someday, but now. And that expectation left little room for reflection or rest. The crown had always come with pressure, but now it came with urgency. Every announcement, every gesture, every silence, all were watched, interpreted, debated. The royal family was being tested not just by external challenges, but by internal fragility. The weight of duty had never felt heavier. Prince William's bold announcement didn't just signal internal change. It marked a turning point in how the monarchy is viewed by the public. And this time, people were paying attention. Across Britain and around the world, reaction to William's speech was swift. Traditionalists were stunned. For decades, the monarchy had followed a script, one rooted in hierarchy, legacy, and quiet continuity. William's message was different. It was modern, intentional, and transparent. No royal language, no vague symbolism, just a clear plan for the future. Younger generations, who had long grown distant from royal tradition, suddenly leaned in. Social media lit up with praise for the new structure. Hashtags like #RoyalReset and #NextGenMonarchy trended across platforms. Clips of William's speech spread fast, particularly his call for the crown to walk beside the people, not above them. For the first time in years, the monarchy didn't feel like something inherited. It felt like something chosen, yet not all responses were glowing. Conservative royal commentators questioned the speed of change. "Where is the continuity?" one columnist asked. "What happened to shared history?" Some saw the reforms as a quiet dethroning of Camilla. Others believed it risked alienating loyalists who viewed tradition as sacred. Parliament, too, took notice. A few MPs praised the focus on public service, while others cautioned that slimming the monarchy could leave power gaps in diplomacy and heritage preservation. But the tide of opinion had already shifted. William and Catherine, despite the pressure they now faced, had become symbols of a monarchy trying to stay relevant. Their initiatives around mental health, education, and transparency felt more aligned with everyday life, and that mattered. Public polls began to reflect this shift. Approval ratings for the couple surged. Even former skeptics noted that William's approach felt more human than ceremonial. Inside the palace, changes were already underway. The Royal Advisory Council began to take shape. Meetings were held weekly, and rather than palace-only voices, outside experts were invited, from education leaders to charity heads. A streamlined royal calendar was introduced, focused less on parades and ribbon cuttings, more on substance and service. William's leadership style was direct but inclusive. He listened, but he moved quickly, no longer just preparing for the crown. He was shaping it. Still, there were unanswered questions. Would Camilla return to public life in any real capacity? How much influence would Charles retain as his health shifted? And how would the monarchy handle rising pressure to become even more transparent? For now, one thing was clear: the old rules were being rewritten, and Prince William wasn't waiting for a coronation to lead. Behind the headlines, behind the bold declarations and public appearances, a quieter story was unfolding. one of strain, silence, and personal sacrifice. Prince William might have taken the spotlight, but he wasn't immune to the weight of it. With his father battling cancer, his wife recovering from chemotherapy, and his stepmother effectively removed from royal life, William's role had shifted from future king to immediate anchor. Every meeting, every engagement, every speech now carried more urgency and more pressure. Those close to him say he carries it well. He stays composed in public, firm in private. But even the most disciplined heir is still human. And in quieter moments, staff have noticed the fatigue in his face, the pauses in his step, the rare but telling silences in meetings that used to move briskly. For Catherine, the shift has been deeply personal. Once at the center of the monarchy's public presence, she now operates mostly out of view, focusing on recovery and her children. The diagnosis had shaken her world. She chose to keep it private for as long as she could, but when the news broke, the public's reaction was immediate and emotional. She was praised for her strength, but that didn't make the journey any easier. Some days she's seen at home, walking in the gardens with the children, or reading quietly. Her schedule has been cleared. Her phone, usually active with planning, now stays quiet more often than not. She's focused on healing, but those who know her say she's eager to return, not just for duty, but for stability. She understands that, like William, her presence is now more than ceremonial. It's symbolic, and her absence is felt. Then there's Charles, a king with limited time to shape his reign. His illness, though described publicly as treatable, has clearly taken a toll. His appearances are fewer, shorter. He now delegates more than he ever expected to. And though he's given William his blessing to take the lead, those close to him say it's been bittersweet. This was supposed to be his era, but the calendar now belongs to someone else. And, finally, Camilla. She has not spoken publicly since the collapse, nor has she reappeared. Her close staff say she's resting, but the truth is harder to define. Some days she takes long walks alone. Other days she doesn't leave her room. After years of rebuilding her image, of earning public acceptance, it took one morning to undo all of it, not by scandal, but by omission. To be written out of the future without warning was a wound that words can't bandage. The royal family may be a symbol of continuity, but inside the palace walls, it's a family like any other, facing grief, illness, uncertainty, and change all at once. And as the public looks on, what they see is only the surface. The real cost of a new era is being paid in quiet moments. Change doesn't stop at announcements. It has to be followed by action. And inside Buckingham Palace, that action has already begun. In the weeks following Prince William's speech and Queen Camilla's dramatic exit from public life, a quiet restructuring took shape. Advisors were reassigned. Senior aides met behind closed doors to review the royal calendar, outreach strategies, and internal communications. The institution wasn't just responding to a moment, it was preparing for a new era. At the center of this rebuild was clarity. Prince William's Royal Advisory Council began forming its core. Experts from fields like education, mental health, and diplomacy were brought in, not as figureheads, but as working voices. The goal? A monarchy that listens, adjusts, and leads through service, not symbolism. Public-facing events shifted in tone. Gone were long, formal processions and ceremonial walkthroughs. In their place came more direct community visits, schools, hospitals, youth programs. William and Catherine's initiatives became the model. Every appearance was now designed to answer one question: what value does this bring to the people? And people noticed. Polls showed a bump in approval ratings, especially among the 18 to 35 demographic. Social media engagement surged around royal programs linked to mental health, literacy, and family support. For a generation often indifferent to royal tradition, this felt new, accessible, relatable. But rebuilding came with trade-offs. Royal traditions once seen as untouchable were under review. Questions arose over titles, residences, and even funding transparency. William reportedly supported efforts to slim the monarchy's taxpayer-funded budget, a move that appealed to modern values but unsettled some traditionalists within the House of Lords and among senior aristocrats. Inside the palace, the mood was a mix of optimism and caution. Longtime staffers admitted things felt different, lighter, perhaps, but also unpredictable. Charles remained king, but his presence was limited. Camilla had not resumed duties, and without a formal regency, William's leadership operated in a gray space, unofficial but undeniable. The Queen's absence, though not discussed publicly, left a visible gap in state functions. Catherine, still healing, attended only when absolutely necessary, so the spotlight stayed on William. Every word he spoke, every decision he made, now held more weight than ever. And yet, behind the institutional response was something deeper. The realization that the crown could no longer rely on legacy alone. Relevance had become the monarchy's new currency. As one royal aide quietly put it, "We're not just protecting the past anymore. We're building something that has to survive the future." The aftermath of Prince William's announcement and Queen Camilla's collapse reverberated far beyond palace walls. Within minutes, footage of the moment was everywhere. TikTok exploded with slowed-down clips, Twitter trended with hashtags like #RoyalShift and #CamillaCollapse, and YouTube thumbnails asked the same question: was this planned? For some, William's speech marked a turning point. Young audiences praised his directness and vision. "Finally, a royal speaking our language," one viral post said. Others hailed the changes as necessary to keep the monarchy relevant in a modern world. But Camilla's absence from the speech struck a nerve. Many saw her exclusion as cold, especially after years spent building public trust. Critics questioned whether William had gone too far, too fast. "She stood by Charles when no one else did," read one widely shared comment. "Now she's erased without a word?" Media outlets were divided. Some praised William's leadership. Others wondered if the monarchy was fracturing under its own weight. In Commonwealth nations, the shakeup reignited debates about their ties to the crown. As for Camilla, her silence only deepened speculation. Was she stepping back voluntarily? Or had a decision been made for her? The monarchy, long defined by quiet tradition, had been thrust into loud, unfiltered debate. And for the first time in years, the public wasn't just watching, they were choosing sides. One thing was certain: the monarchy had changed. Whether it had evolved or cracked was still up for debate. But the crown, once untouchable, was now being questioned like never before.